Hey there. Thanks for joining me for Storytime Live with Dr. Bird, where I like to read biblical stories and look at them through the lens of passages that are talking about sex, marriage, and physical abuse that involves intimate body parts. And then I would like to just talk about it all and be really honest about it. So that's what I'm up to with these Storytime Lives. So let's get started here. Oh, all right. Well, this is Thursday, September 14th. And on Tuesday, when we were reading through part of Leviticus, some of the laws in Leviticus, I came upon a passage in Leviticus 21 talking about priests and things that defile and blah, blah, blah. And then we saw the same in the English. We saw a defile language used in reference to women. And I was commenting that there are actually two different things, and the fact that they're both being translated as defile in the English is really confusing to me. So I needed to look up the Hebrew, and I couldn't really do it on the fly live. So I looked it up. And fortunately, I am actually kind of relieved. In the Hebrew, they are two different words, two different connotations. And so that's helpful for any of you who were here for that or watched it and saw that and were wondering when it talked about women being defiled. Again, it's still a frustrating thing for me. The concept or the connotation of having sex makes a woman defiled in a way that never is said of men. That is still a problem for me, but they are using two different verbs there. So that's helpful. And while I'm here, and I actually might just do a separate, short little Does the Bible Tell You So video on this as well. But someone had asked me to comment on or to look into, since I have this thing about what we see in the English, often in the Hebrew Bible, is the verb marry, some form of marry, do not marry them, do not. But in the Hebrew, it's actually just take. The language is that of taking, and sometimes it's even much more intense and violent and almost abusive. The verb that's being used there, that's still being translated as marry. And so someone had pointed out, well, what about then the verb divorce? Is that actually on par with this taking concept instead of just divorce as we think of today? Very appropriate question. I appreciated it. And I had a few minutes today to look into it. There's more to look into. I didn't look into the Greek, and I think there's more in terms of just looking up references, the different ways it's used. But it is interesting that the Hebrew is in keeping with. So the Hebrew of taking is reflected in the divorce. So yeah, it's much more violent. It's about casting out, like cast out from your midst the people who are defiling you. Cast out the idols that you shouldn't be worshiping. That kind of a casting out is what is the verb that's being used for the most part. Again, I imagine there's multiple concepts that are being used there, but the predominant, a common one, I should say, for now, this isn't exhaustive. So a common usage is that of simply casting out. So yes, even there, the language of divorce is also still taming things down a bit, right? Compared to what the Hebrew is suggesting, much more objectifying, and I would even say violent, than what the English is letting us think. So I appreciated that comment, that request. Can't remember. I think I know who that was, but anyway, I appreciate all of that. And so those are the two things I said I would look into at least. And yeah, I think I should make a little separate video about the divorce, the marriage and divorce language in the Hebrew versus what we're seeing it being translated into. Okay, so we are moving into the book of Numbers today. And what does that mean? What does that mean for you? Well, it just means we have not as much to look at, I don't think, but there are a few key passages that are rather interesting. And at least from my perspective, what we're looking at today is almost more what's the word? It's almost more insidious than in terms of its implications and its how it has played out for people than some of the ones that we look at, like when we talk about, if the daughter of a priest is prostituting herself, burn that bitch to death. Like that's just really direct and obvious. So you may have seen me talk about this before, and you actually may have seen me show this video even before, but I am going to share a video with you. It's a two-minute video, but what I think is actually quite affective is when we have these conversations about population or census taking, that doesn't even talk about women. So we're counting men, and there's no reference to the women, not even as the baby makers that they are essential as, right? So I can't decide. I think let me show this video first with you, because it's talking about not specifically the passage in Numbers, but it's talking about this issue. And I think because I did work fairly hard on the language for what I'm saying, I think the video will say it well. So I'm going to go ahead. This is a trailer. So or a snippet, whatever, from I created a video series back in the fall of 2019 that was ready to roll out in 2020. And it's called Marriage in the Bible, a discussion among friends. I created it for groups of people to work through together. And it's not just for faith group communities, but that's who I had in mind as I created it. So this is a snippet from one of those videos, and I'm going to go ahead and share it now. Share screen. I think this is going to work. We'll see. Yep.
The first is quick and easy, which is noting how often children, more specifically sons, are talked about as being born to men. It's almost as if it happens magically.
Oh, oh no. I have some issues there loading the video. I guess you saw that. Let me see what's happening if I refresh that page and see if it comes back. Even just the opening lines, though, you get the point that I think that I'm trying to make in that clip. Let's see.
Magically. For example, Cain knew his woman, and she conceived and bore Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father of Mehujael, and Mehujael the father of, and so forth. Though the genealogy cannot happen without women, they are rarely mentioned, much less named. Then, in the next chapter, when Adam had lived 130 years, he became the father of a son in his likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. Genesis 5 then goes on to narrate 11 generations of men using this example of men becoming fathers of sons. And then again, in Genesis 11, after the flood stories, we get another 10 generations from Shem, the oldest son of Noah, to Abram, the father of the people who become known as the Israelites and later as the Jews. When Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. Plenty of people roll their eyes at the long lists of genealogies wherein men begat their sons. This also happens in the genealogies used for Jesus in Matthew 1 and Luke 3. At the beginning of Matthew, Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. This continues with a reference to 4 women named throughout 41 generations. In Luke 3, it looks more like this. Jesus was the son, as was thought, of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Matthat, the son of Levi, and so forth through 76 generations, none of which name the women involved. So instead of glazing over the names that do not mean much to you, perhaps take a step back and notice what is being taken for granted. I assure you, I'm actually not trying to whine about this issue, but doesn't this send a message to you about women's roles as baby makers? The second piece.
Okay. Well, I hope you could hear that. And anyway, if you're interested in seeing more of those, by the way, you can access those on my website, which is jennifergracebird.com. There, if you go to the Marriage in the Bible tab, I have the videos. You can see, trailers, and you can see where you can rent or purchase videos there. But the point, right? So I hope that shows you the point I'm trying to make here. And I want to read through part of the opening of Numbers, part of Numbers chapter 1. And my intent in sharing that video with you and in having this specific focus is to think about what is being communicated over time, over generations. And when I talked about this before, at least once, somebody made a comment about how they are really into genealogies and looking into things. Very cool, right? I'm sure you discover fascinating things. And they commented even 100 years ago, people were still only talking about women as the wife to a man, right? And that we're tracing through the sons, we care about the sons and all those different, like it's still a thing, right? I get that. And that's part of my point, right? If you can write scriptures like this and nobody bats an eye, then or now, nobody stops to say, oh, but wait a minute, this is the number of men. So that means that we're talking about how many, if you're including women and children. So let me just start out and we'll see where this takes us. How about that? So I'm at the very beginning of the book of Numbers chapter 1, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first day of the 2nd month, in the 2nd year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, take a census of the whole congregation of Israelites. Note that language, right? The whole congregation of Israelites, but we're really just talking about people with penises, okay? In their clans, by ancestral houses, according to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that in like this dismissive of trans people's bodies today or then, by the way. They're really just talking about the people identified as men. Okay. Take a census of the whole congregation of Israelites in their clans by ancestral houses, according to the number of names, every male individually. It's like the whole congregation, every male. And that's how they thought of it. We still see this today, right? Like when you see in religious spaces where men and women are separated. I mean, that is still happening in Christian contexts today. It tends to be much more like the Greek Orthodox. I've seen congregations where it says this is the women's side and this is the men's side. So we're separating because there's a difference here, right? In Muslim spaces, usually the women are supposed to stay in the back behind. Sometimes there's a wall. Sometimes you can see through it a little bit, but they have a separate space than the men. So it's trippy for them to see tourists hanging out in the space, female tourists. Right. The Wailing Wall, there's a male female segment, right? The males get the good stuff, good view of the wall, good access, whatever. It's still happening, right? And that's just segregating. That's not quite as bad, perhaps, as not even counting. But the whole congregation of Israelites is actually just a reference to all the men. So from 20 years old and upward, everyone in Israel able to go to war. So, of course, this has a different, right? There's a reason to count male bodies for war, right? You and Aaron shall enroll them company by company. A man from each tribe shall be with you, each man the head of his ancestral house. These are the names of the men who shall assist you. And we get a whole slew of stuff. I am going to read some of this just to kind of read it because it's important to me to read it out loud, because hearing it is different than just looking at it. From Reuben, Elizur, son of Shadur. Oh, that's an unusual name. That makes me very curious about the spelling there. From Simeon, Shelumiel, son of Zerushadai. From Judah, Nashon, son of Aminadab. From Issachar, Nathaniel, son of Zuar. From Zebulun, Eliab, son of Helon. From the sons of Joseph, from Ephraim, Elishama, son of Amihud. From Manasseh, Gamaliel, son of Pedazur. From Benjamin, Abidan, son of Gidoni. From Dan, Iazor, son of Amishadai. From Asher, Pagiel, son of Ochran. From Gad, Eliasaph, son of Duel. From Naphtali, Ahira, son of Enan. These were the ones chosen from the congregation, the leaders of their ancestral tribes, the heads of the divisions of Israel. So we're really just talking about war. We're not talking about counting the people. We're talking about war, right? Just so we're clear. Moses and Aaron took these men who had been designated by name, and on the first day of the second month, they assembled the whole congregation together. They registered themselves in their clans by their ancestral houses according to the number of names from 20 years old and upward, individually, as the Lord commanded Moses. So he enrolled them in the wilderness of Sinai. I just think it's really interesting. And I didn't look into the Hebrew and all the different language pieces here. You take a census of the whole congregation of Israelites. What is that actually referring to? It's not a census the way we talk about census, because we're talking about counting everybody, So is there a different concept there maybe that they're even working with to begin with, in all fairness? Verse 20, the descendants of Reuben, Israel's firstborn, their lineage, in their clans, by their ancestral houses, according to the number of names, individually, every male from 20 years old and upward, everyone able to go to war. Those enrolled of the tribe of Reuben were 46,500. 46,500. So that's the men. So we're talking about twice that, and then some, right? If you're in terms of the number of people in Reuben's tribe. So they're not actually taking a census. They're just taking roll of the men available for war. And then we can just keep going. But let me just read a couple more, because I think it's actually effective to do this to give you the idea. Because it's been in these scriptures for over 2,000 years, and people read them, and it's permeating something, right? There's an element here that we're just taking for granted and dismissing, which is the women that created all 46,500 of those men, right? The descendants of Simeon, their lineage, in their clans, by their ancestral houses, those of them that were numbered, according to the number of names, individually, every male from 20 years old and upward, everyone able to go to war. Those enrolled of the tribe of Simeon were 59,300. The descendants of Gad, their lineage, in their clans, by their ancestral houses, according to the number of the names, from 20 years old and upward, everyone able to go to war, every male able to go to war. Those enrolled of the tribe of Gad were 45,650. And it goes through all 11 tribes and the 2 sub-tribes of Joseph, right? So I'm going to skip over to verse 48 of this chapter. The Lord said to Moses, no, actually, it's kind of interesting. The Levites were not numbered by their ancestral tribe along with him. The Lord said to Moses, only the tribe of Levi shall you not enroll, And you shall not take a census of them with the other Israelites. Rather, you shall appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of the covenant, and over all its equipment, and over all that belongs to it. They are to carry the tabernacle and all its equipment, and they shall tend it, and they shall camp around the tabernacle. When the tabernacle is to set out, the Levites shall take it down. And when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up. And any outsider who comes near shall be put to death. The other Israelites shall camp in their respective regimental camps by companies. But the Levites shall camp around the tabernacle of the covenant, and there may be no wrath on the congregation of the Israelites. That there may be no wrath. And the Levites shall perform the guard duty, of the tabernacle of the covenant. The Israelites did so, and they did just as the Lord commanded Moses. Okay. Do you have any comments, any sort of things going on in your thoughts right now in response to this idea that we've just taken a census of the entire congregation of Israel, and it is focused on the men 20 years older, 20 years and older. That's it. We're not actually taking a census. We're not actually talking about the whole congregation of Israel. I would love it if there are any questions, if you want to pop them in right now, and then we'll see about moving on. But again, I think I have said this before somewhere, so I'm sorry for repeating myself, but I remember when I was in graduate school at Vanderbilt, I went to hear, this concept of the mark of the covenant, right? Circumcision of a man's penis, right? Or boy, actually, because you do it to an infant, an 8-year-old infant. The mark of the covenant is only available to people with penises. And I just, I'd never stopped to think about that until I got to grad school and I was doing a lot of questioning of everything, right? And I just remember thinking, yeah, where does that leave women? Like, what does that mean that women literally do not get to have the mark of the covenant on their body the way men do? I mean, if you're looking at this in a positive way, they get to have that. Why don't we get to have something, right? I'm happy to have people challenge the fact that circumcision is not a great idea. Not my point right now, but I'm with you on that. So I thought, what is that? Yeah, where does that leave women? What does that do? So there was a Jewish scholar who was coming to speak about that. And he basically said, it's not such a big deal. And that sealed the deal for me, that it is a big fucking deal. And it pissed me off that this respected Jewish scholar, who's a biblical scholar, and he's a Jewish man, and he's a Hebrew Bible scholar. I'm not going to say the name because I don't like to do that kind of a thing. But and nobody's, I don't remember if, some of the tenured faculty who were there challenged him on that, or if they just let it go because it's his presentation, it's his comment. Did someone ask a question to push back on that? I don't remember, to be honest, but I remember leaving thinking it was more of a respect for what he's saying because he's an expert. He's a Jewish man and a biblical scholar. So we're going to, that was the sense in the room, regardless of how other people were thinking about it. I just remember thinking I was done with that kind of crap, right? I don't care which religious tradition it's a part of, right? And I was in a place in life where I was very sensitive to the way Christianity is anti-Judaic in its very origin story, in its origins in the first couple centuries. It's deeply, deeply problematic and violent towards Judaism. And so I was very sensitive to that at that point in time. So I was trying really hard to be respectful of and defer to Jewish scholars and trying, understanding and trying to respect Judaism and blah, blah, blah. And then I got to her, I was like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that anymore either, because it's the same issue going on over there that's going on here around sexism, misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, making claims and claims of land and people and ideas because you're connecting it to a God who said so. I'm done with that, So why was all of that? Somehow that related to this issue of circumcision, the concept of this Really, of course, the whole congregation of Israel is just the men, right? That's all they care about. Okay, let's see if there are some questions or comments up here that I need to respond to. It doesn't look like it. Y'all are having a good time chatting, which is great. That makes me happy that you all come here and chat. That's fun. Yeah, I had follow-up thoughts from my conversation from our live on Tuesday, but I think it's a little bit too odd to jump into those. It's a bit too much of a non sequitur to just throw it out there. So maybe there'll be a day when I can go back and bring it into this conversation again. But okay, so let's move forward in the book of Numbers. I'm not gonna read it all. I'd skipped over, 9 of the tribes or whatever. Chapter 2 starts this way, and I'm not gonna read the whole chapter, but I just want you to hear it. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "The Israelites shall camp each in their respective regiments. Under ensigns by their ancestral houses, they shall camp facing the tent of meeting on every side." So we're just jumping into we're preparing for war, right? We're in the book of Numbers, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. We're getting ready to go take over the land, right? We're preparing for battle. That's what's happening. And so there's all kinds of numbers, all kinds of names, lots of lists of numbers, which is why the English name for this is Numbers. That is not the Hebrew name for it, by the way. Oh, the Hebrew name is Bamidbar, which is in the desert. Thank you. I just want to put this up there. Thank you. Is it Docles or I don't. I'm sorry. I don't like mispronouncing names. Names are very important to me. I'm so sorry, but thank you. Thank you for that super chat. A little love. I'll take it. Yeah. So we have on the north side, on the south side, on the tent of meeting, blah, blah, blah. The tent of meeting. So many comments here to reflect on that are not relevant to the theme I'm trying to stick to here, which is sex, marriage, physical harm related to intimate body parts, because I don't like to say sexual abuse. Sex, I think, is good, however messy, and assault is not. I don't want to put the two together. So chapter 3 then in Numbers, because we're going to keep moving here so I can I'm going to try to stay focused here a little bit. So at the end of chapter 2, the Israelites did just as the Lord had commanded Moses. They camped by regiments, and they set out the same way, every one by clans, according to the ancestral houses. This is the lineage of Aaron and Moses at the time when the Lord spoke with Moses on Mount Sinai. These are the names of the sons of Aaron: Nadab the firstborn, and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. These are the names of the sons of Aaron, the anointed priests, whom he ordained to minister as priests. Nadab and Abihu died before the Lord when they offered unholy fire before the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai, and they had no children. Eleazar and Ithamar served as priests in the lifetime of their father Aaron. And then we just kind of we keep talking about Levites and things. So this is in their context. This is what's relevant. We have, then they do enroll all the Levites by ancestral houses, but all of this is about the men. It's all about men. We're not talking about women. I want to share, let me do this briefly. I pulled up a title. This isn't about the Hebrew Bible so much as the Newer Testament, but there's a book by Megan McKenna called Not Counting Women and Children: Neglected Stories from the Bible. And I'm sure she's not the only one who's written about this, but it's interesting that there isn't more being said. I do have colleagues who focus on stories about children, and a colleague who studies Newer Testament, and also a colleague in the Hebrew Bible, who have tried to talk about the stories about children and the implications for children. It's it's not as common though as I guess I would maybe think. All right, so that's my point in wanting to talk about the opening of Numbers this way. There's so much going on that just seems normal and it's focused on the men. And where does that leave women? What does that mean for women and the children in this case? Because 20 years old, I mean, if that had been the case for the United States, like half of those recruits would have been, like it was 18, not 20, right? For taking young men to war in Vietnam. Anyway, where does that leave everybody? What's going on? So over and over and over, every single book of the Hebrew Bible, and most of it in the Newer Testament, it's being told from the perspective of men, for men, by men, for men, and who gives a rat's ass about the women, right? Is basically the message here over and over again. And yet, that's kind of basic issue. None of us would be here without women, So obviously the same is true for men. We do need the same, like we need that little ejaculate going on, but yeah, there's some serious heavy lifting going on by the females that is just being overlooked, assumed, and diminished to men becoming fathers, right? That's my point here. Okay. Chapter 4, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, take a census of the Kohathites, separate from the other Levites, by their clans and their ancestral houses from 30 years up. Again, we're doing the same thing. We're taking numbers. The service of the Kohathites relating to the tent of meeting concerns the most holy things. So we've got something special going on there. We have more enrollment going on in the chapter 4 of Numbers, and it looks like it's taking census of the Levites or the priestly folk. Okay. We get over to chapter 5, and we get to a passage that I think I did already talk about. So chapter 5 starts with a reference to leprosy, actually. So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, command the Israelites to put out of the camp everyone who is leprous or has a discharge, and everyone who is unclean through contact with a corpse. I need to talk about that again briefly. One of my friends, I commented, I was like, oh my God, it drives me crazy that people just talk about no touching dead bodies. Again, I get the whole, when bodies start to decay, they look pretty funky or whatever, and pretty incredible, actually. Okay, diseases, but yeah, I'm still, and I've molded over. I'm like, yeah, I'm still not certain that it's about the diseases. I think it's just the ick factor. Everyone who is unclean through contact with a corpse. Because it's an important part of life. It's an important stage of life. The idea, the reality of death and dying. It's just reality, right? And I don't know. Okay, focus. You shall put out both male and female, putting them outside the camp. They must not defile their camp where I dwell among them. The Israelites did so, putting them outside the camp as the Lord had spoken. Then speak to the Israelites. When a man or a woman wrongs another, breaking faith with the Lord, that da 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 da. And then we get to this really unsavory passage, which I know I've talked about. So we're in chapter 5, verse 11. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelites and say to them, if any man's woman, my English says wife, goes astray and is unfaithful to him, if a man has had intercourse with her, but it is hidden from her man, my English says husband, so that she is undetected, though she has defiled herself, and there is no witness against her, since she was not caught in the act. And then we get into this issue of if a spirit of jealousy comes on him. And that's really what's so interesting to me, is this is all about appeasing a man's jealousy instead of addressing the fact that he needs to get over himself. It's really fascinating to me. If a spirit of jealousy comes on him and he is jealous of his woman, my English says wife, who has defiled herself, or if a spirit of jealousy comes on him and he is jealous of his woman, my English says wife, though she has not defiled herself. Again, the issues of defilement, and then a man's jealousy is being attended to instead of put in its place. Then the man shall bring his woman, my English says wife, to the priest, and he shall bring the offering required for her. So interesting. All these, required for her. He brings the offering for, I don't know, 1/10 of an ephah of barley flour. He shall pour no oil on it and put no frankincense on it, for it's a grain offering of jealousy, a grain offering of remembrance, bringing iniquity to remembrance. There's no questioning of the woman going on here. There's no questioning of the man she was allegedly, getting down with. None of that. This is just a test that we're going to run because your man, your partner, your spouse it suspects you. That's all this is, right? And you know what's interesting to me is how many times, even still, this still takes place. I don't mean about accusing spouses of stepping out emotionally, physically, sexually. I'm talking about just in terms of people. I might be saying something I shouldn't say right now. Let's just say that I know what it's like to be charged with something and not be given a chance to defend myself. And I mean in my place of work. Many moons ago, so this isn't a recent thing, and I am not the only one to experience it. Let's just be very clear. In higher ed, right? There's just so many egos, fragile egos, and a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear involved. There's a lot of I don't know how much you all know about academy and higher ed and spaces of higher learning, but there's a lot. They're predominantly framed around a patriarchal mindset, which means there's a lot of fear, and there's a fear of lack or of not enough. And so there's not enough of anything to go around. Acknowledgement, resources, time, appreciation, all of it. And it's a fear. It's not a reality, but it's the way things run. And there's a lot of control by the people in administration. And, I just experienced a really, really bizarre and intense dose of that in my time as a full-time professor many, many, many moons ago. There's so many things about higher ed that are just messed up right now, but this issue of controlling bodies and controlling narratives, and I don't know, it just without an ability to be honest and to have or to confront. It's just I know I'm speaking kind of vaguely. I'm sorry, but I keep mulling this part of my past over because I am trying to find my way as an independent scholar. So I think it just keeps coming back to me. But this thing about bringing a woman to the priest and nobody's asking her a single question. I can relate to that. And let me just tell you that my punishment for that was horrendous and ironic all at once. So just really interesting when people in power are not kind and are not empathetic and are afraid. There's a lot of fear involved in the way people are mistreated in higher ed these days. If you've heard any stories about people not being given a fair chance to defend or talk about, I think those make some of the headlines in certain places, but I don't know how much people in general, the typical people know about all that kind of stuff. It's been going on for years, and it's just barely being talked, just snippets of it are getting out there, and you're not getting the full picture even now that they're still now that they're trying to report about it. You're not getting the full picture even of that, and it's been going on for decades. I mean, it's horrific on people. It's horrific. It just plays out horrifically for people. So that was a random sidebar. I don't know. Okay. Should I keep reading this story? Because I've read it before and it makes me so angry. The whole thing makes me angry. I'm going to read it again because I'm just going to do it. A grain offering of remembrance, bringing iniquity to remembrance. So here's the thing that goes down. Starting in verse 16 of chapter 5. Then the priest shall bring her near and set her before the Lord. Again, no questions. of her. The priest shall take holy water in an earthen vessel and take some of the dust that's on the floor of the tabernacle and put it into the water. That always makes me giggle. Like what exactly are we expecting to be in the dust on the floor? That is what you're taking? What kinds of elements of sacrifices or things that you've burned are accumulating there? Do you have things, are there abortifacients being kept in the temple, for instance, that we know the dust is from it is all over the place? Like, what is that? Why the dust from the floor? Anyway, put it into the water. The priest shall set the woman before the Lord, dishevel the woman's hair. I remember commenting on this last time. And like she'd be like she's just been caught, right? There's probably a different reason for that, but I don't know what it is. And place in her hands the grain offering of remembrance, which is a grain offering of jealousy. This is about the man, even though it's being poured out onto her. In his own hand, the priest shall have the water of bitterness that brings the curse. Then the priest shall make her take an oath, saying, if no man has lain with you, which is funny because, she does have a man, she does belong to one. But anyway, if no man has lain with you, if you have not turned aside to uncleanness while under your man's authority, and my English says husband on that second one, be immune to this water of bitterness that brings the curse. Magic. Just be immune, right? Just be immune. Yeah, okay. But if you have gone astray while under your man's authority, my English says husband's authority, if you have defiled yourself and some man other than your man, husband in English, has had intercourse with you, let the priest make the woman take the oath of the curse and say to the woman, the Lord make you an execration and an oath among your people. When the Lord makes your uterus drop, your womb discharge. Now, may this water that brings the curse enter your bowels and make your womb discharge, your uterus drop. And the woman shall say, amen, amen. Yeah, let it be so to me, as you've just said. Just so we're clear, for thousands of years, people have known of abortifacients, right? It's not like this is a recent thing that the humans have decided they want to maybe take some control over their bodies. Like we've known about how to do this, even if it's just throwing yourself over the back of a chair. We have that in writing that's at least 3,000 years old, right? None of this is new, right? Then the priest shall put these curses in writing and wash them off into the water of bitterness. He shall make the woman drink the water of bitterness that brings the curse. And the water that brings the curse shall enter her and cause bitter pain. Fantastic, right? The priest shall take the grain offering of jealousy out of the woman's hand and shall elevate the grain offering before the Lord and bring it to the altar. And the priest shall take a handful of the grain offering. It is as its memorial portion, and turn it into smoke on the altar, and afterwards shall make the woman drink the water. When he has made her drink the water, then, if she has defiled herself and has been unfaithful to her man, my English says husband, the water that brings the curse shall enter into her and cause bitter pain, and her womb shall discharge, her uterus drop, and the woman shall become an execration among her people. It is magic, right? If she's innocent, it won't affect her. If she's guilty, it will. But if the woman has not defiled herself and is clean, then she shall be immune and be able to conceive children. It's just magic like that. There is something about how casual, even though there's nothing casual about a man being jealous and angry. In this context, we're talking about a man being jealous, and there's nothing casual about that, but it's ridiculous how casual this is about what you're doing to a woman's body. and the magic of it all, right? The desperately magical piece of this, to be immune. This is the law in cases of jealousy when a woman, my English says wife, when a woman, while under her man's authority, my English says husband's authority, goes astray and defiles herself. Or when a spirit of jealousy comes on a man and he is jealous of his woman, my English says wife, jealous of his wife, then he shall set the woman before the Lord, and the priest shall apply this entire law to her. The man shall be free from iniquity, but the woman shall bear her iniquity. That's fantastic way to wrap that one up, right? Are we talking about the man as in the husband who is jealous and hasn't had any sort of conversation with her about it? Or are we talking about the man that she stepped out on her man with and he's free of guilt? I don't know, actually, because when you have that kind of is all man, 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 there's no difference between the two. I get pretty tired of it, you know? I get tired of pettiness. I get tired of, you know, a form of human ego or a form of just fear, distrust, lack of community. I just get tired of every single element that I encounter here that models some sort of relational dynamic that we refer to as marriage in this kind of a way. I just get so tired of it. There are people who will approach their pastors and say, I want a biblical marriage. I want a marriage. I want to get married, and I want our marriage to be biblical. And I would love for the day for that ridiculousness, being so uninformed about what the Bible actually says about marriages. Love for that day to come to an end, right? That people are so clueless that they think a biblical marriage is about a man and a woman, no divorce, and lots of babies. And that is not what the Bible is talking about at all. That is not the way it's talked about. It is not talking about two equals choosing to enter into a commitment to each other. No, this is not a commitment to each other. This is a woman belongs to him. He is not committing to her. There's nothing he's committing to her aside from, providing for her. Not a small deal. I'm not saying that, but this isn't a mutual love, taking vows to each other. And I see students saying that every single term that I teach Hebrew Bible and ask them to look at and think about what's being modeled in terms of a marriage. So many people think that these couples had vows said back and forth to each other. And the point is, we really don't know what ever was said or done in any such a thing, if there ever was such a ceremony, because nobody talks about it. Nobody's written about it. In this kind of a situation, it makes me think, there's no argument. You don't get to have a solid argument from silence. I get that, right? But you look at something like this, it makes it pretty clear to me that he was not asked to do much in terms of, these are not two equals. They did not choose this. She was sold to him. He purchased her, all of that. She's his property. And some men, I do not question that some men treated the women they purchased very well, because just like today, there are some men who are just lovely human beings and are very kind, right? I get that too. It's just that biblical passages, this is interesting too, right? This is Numbers chapter 5. This is right after we've taken a census of all of Israel, right? All of the congregation of Israel, which is really just counting the men and numbering by tribe how many warriors there are so that they can be prepared to take over the promised land when they get out of the desert. 4 chapters talking about men, all the people of Israel, men. And then the first thing you get in terms of any kind of reference to a woman is this: a man who is jealous of his woman. No conversation. It's implied to me, at least. There was not a conversation there because it's all speculative. Right? If she did and she wasn't caught, or if he thinks she did and she wasn't caught, or if he thinks she did and she really didn't, doesn't matter. He thinks she did. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. make, cause a hysterectomy. But if you're innocent, it won't happen. I don't know. I'm not sure if I can finish going through the Bible doing this live thing, because it wears on me to do this, to talk about it, to name it out loud like this. And because I think about it, I process it. It affects me, right? And here's another instance of what drives me crazy about these scriptures that I used to love, right? I used to devote myself to memorizing passages, long passages, so I'd have God's word on hand, so I could pray using God's words, so I could use God's word back to him. It's a serious form of flattery. I didn't think of it that way at the time, but chapter 6, you've got the Lord spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when either men or women make a special vow, the vow of a Nazirite, right? Someone consecrated or separated, to separate themselves to the Lord, they shall separate themselves from wine and strong drink. They shall drink no wine, vinegar, or other vinegar. That's interesting. Vinegar's good for you. And shall not drink any grape juice or eat grapes, fresh or dried. No grapes. All their days as Nazirites, they shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. All the days of their Nazirite vow, no razor shall come upon the head until the time is completed for which they separate themselves to the Lord. They shall be holy. They shall let the locks of the head grow long. They've said men or women, but it's interesting because I think we're still talking about just men. But they said it. All the days that they separate themselves to the Lord, they shall not go near a corpse. Even if their father or mother, brother or sister should die, they may not defile themselves because their consecration to God is upon the head. All their days as Nazirites, they are holy to the Lord. I think of the people who do wash dead bodies, and what a service that is, what an element, what a meaningful ritual that is actually for people. Flipping this particular thing on its head. If someone dies very suddenly nearby, defiling the consecrated head, then they shall shave the head on the day of their cleansing. The 7th day, they shall shave it. On the 8th day, they shall bring 2 turtle doves. I mean, we're taking this seriously, this no touching dead bodies. All of this about the Nazirites and there's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just going to skip over because it's not technically part of my theme here, but I'm trying to make a point. So all of this is chapter 6 of Numbers. After they've shaved the consecrated head, then the priest shall elevate them as an elevation offering before the Lord, their holy portion for the priest. I skipped something here. The priest shall take the shoulder of the ram. Okay, they'll bring the ram offering, yada, yada, yada. They are a holy portion for the priest, right? Priest gets all this good food together with the breast, or it's the way they eat. It's the way they survive. Together with the breast that is elevated and the thigh that is offered. After that, the Nazirites may drink wine. Oh, God, all these weird exceptions and whatevers. This is the law for the Nazirites who take a vow. Their offering to the Lord must be in accordance with the Nazirite vow, apart from what else they can afford. In accordance with whatever vow they take, they shall do, following the law for their consecration. The Lord spoke to Moses. Hang in there with me. I'm almost at my point. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and his son, saying, thus you shall bless the Israelites. You shall say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. I memorized that in the Hebrew so that I could do the benediction in churches in Hebrew. Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha yechunecha. Yasa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Right? Just beautiful, lovely, blah, blah, blah. It's one of the first passages I memorized in Hebrew because it was a meaningful passage and it helped me to learn the verb tenses and all that kind of stuff, right? It's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Lovely poetry. I think it's a lovely concept in terms of what it's saying. And it comes on the tail of telling a woman, like the only reference we have in these first 6 chapters of Numbers is about a woman who is suspected of cheating and being forced to become neutered. Spayed. neutered. She's forced to become unable to, like, and the Lord bless you and keep you. Fuck you. Like, fuck your blessings. That's what that, like, in the context of Numbers chapters 1-6, that's my reaction, that comes at the end of this. And we're going to go talk about the tabernacle and consecrated stuff. And I'm like, I'm just done. I'm done with all of it, you know? So I don't know. We'll pick up there on Tuesday, somewhere in the book of Numbers that's relevant to the themes of sex, marriage, and physical violence that involves intimate body parts. So thanks for being here with me. You thought I was speaking in tongues. It's a pretty language. I think it's a pretty language. Thanks for being here. Thank you for watching. If you're watching it later, thank you for all the various ways you support me. And one of them is showing up live if you're able to and are interested. One is in sharing some of these links with a friend, telling them about my channel and the other work I do, telling them about my website, my personal website, and all the other stuff going on there. Being a patron through my Patreon account, Biblical Bird, purchasing the audio version of my second book, Permission Granted, Take the Bible into Your Own Hands. Supporting me in talking about the book I have coming out, which I still don't know the release date, sometime in November. All the different ways that you all support me by being here and commenting and, all of it. It all works for me. It's all helpful for me. So thank you for that. And I will be back on Tuesday, renewed and refreshed to do this all over again. Okay?